In this video, I'm going to be doing my first mock draft of the 2023 NFL season. Took a little hiatus for a bit. Obviously, I'm back now, and I haven't done a mock draft yet. I was waiting for a lot of the records to come in and a lot of the teams, obviously, to start fizzling out and to start seeing what teams actually are going to need in this offseason. Obviously, give some college players to start really blossoming into NFL prospects. So now I think is a good time to obviously do a mock draft. I wanted to do one a few weeks ago, but obviously we're starting now. So the big thing for this mock draft is I'm going to be making a few trades, very minimal. It's going to be in mainly the beginning of the mock draft, just so some situations probably work out better. And so my mock draft seems a lot more clean. I think that this year is going to be a very interesting draft. It's looking like I really love the 2024 NFL class. If you guys haven't already seen my 2024 NFL draft big board, obviously if you guys haven't seen my 2024 NFL big board, make sure you guys go watch that full video on YouTube where I break down my board and all of my player rankings. Obviously, going off of these mock draft rankings is just not how the NFL is going to work out, and you really have to divulge into these prospects and really see which ones are better and really which ones deserve to go in the first round. So obviously I'm not going to be following this mock draft board heavily. I work for PFF. Obviously I have a bias towards them because I work for them. But obviously everybody's board is going to be different. These are mainly consensus, and a lot of people will just casually do mock drafts and pick whoever's at the top of the board. So these mock drafts will obviously be skewed. But let's get right into this after 2 minutes of divulging into other stuff. With the Cardinals, I just don't think that they take the number one overall pick with Caleb Williams. I think that they're essentially just retaking Kyler Murray. My player comp right now for Caleb Williams is legit Kyler Murray. And I would trade with a team that really does need a future of their franchise, and that's going to be the Las Vegas Raiders. I'm going to give them quite a few picks, and obviously I'm forcing these trades because you can't do a 3 first round trade. But the Raiders are not only a phenomenal market for Caleb Williams, who has been obviously he's in a ton of commercials. Obviously he's a humongous college football personality. Obviously he's a Heisman winner as well. I think that Vegas would be a perfect fit for him as a business-wise decision, but also they're going to have a new head coach, Josh McDaniels. He's going to get fired. Let's be honest. I think that Vegas could fall down the board more than they have at 8. Obviously, they're 3-5 right now, and I think they will fall down the board more, so they'll be closer to getting Caleb Williams. But also, Caleb Williams, he's been struggling a little bit. I think that there are some issues with him. Obviously, when I watch the film, it'll be a little bit different as we go see a different perspective. But I think with his footwork, it really allows him to be a lot more mobile, but also he can get stuck. He puts himself into places where he can't really get out of, like trying to shift around the pocket too much instead of, making a throw is, I think, a big negative that people are going to harp on during the draft. But his footwork and his mobility in the pocket is really what creates a lot of second life. But when the first life isn't working that much and you always have to create a second life, what's going to happen in the NFL when you face some real defenses and they're going to disguise a lot of their blitzes and you're going to have a lot better interior offensive linemen. We saw what happened against Notre Dame when the interior of the offensive line they were running, or the interior defensive line was running a lot of stunts and was killing Caleb Williams. Ended up throwing 3 interceptions in that game as well. There are some question marks about Caleb Williams, but you obviously can't ignore that talent. Do I think he's a generational prospect? No. I think he is, I think he is more of a Kyler Murray type, where he's super fast, super elusive, can create a lot of second life in the pocket, but is not a great pure pocket passer. And I think when he faces really good defenses, he can make some mistakes that are, his own mistakes. And I think he can force a lot of his balls as well. Do I think he's a generational prospect? No, but do I think he still is the best prospect in this class? Probably. Moving on to the Chicago Bears, I'm going to go a 2-round here. They're going to go with Drake May and Marvin Harrison Jr. I love these picks for Chicago. Do I think they're going to be under new management next year? Probably. I don't think Matt Eberflus is going to stick around. I think that they go under an offensive head coach's regime, like many NFL teams are starting to do, focusing on offense more than they are defense, because offense is now winning you basically Super Bowls. We've seen with the Kansas City Chiefs. We've seen with the Rams. But for Drake May, really like him a lot. His accuracy is next level. He's got the really good accuracy coming out of North Carolina, and ever since he got Dontez, or I think it's Dontez Walker, or Tez Walker is his nickname. After he came back, the offense is averaging like 400 plus 500 yards pretty much a game, like multiple touchdowns. Drake May's been doing well. I know that Notre Dame's had 2 losses in a row, and then one against was Miami. I forgot their loss last week. But Drake May, I think, is the second best prospect in this class. I've had him second since the preseason. And then obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm giving their 2 biggest needs because I don't know how Justin Fields is really going to turn out with Chicago. I think he has a lot of potential to be traded in the offseason. He's been doing okay as of recently in Chicago. Obviously, not their best offensive system. They've been struggling a lot. He has been injured with a finger injury. And sometimes he's super good against like a bad teams like the Commanders when he had 4 touchdowns, but other time, and then the Broncos with 4 touchdowns. But then other times, he's not looking his best. And I think in the pocket, I don't think he'll ever truly developly be there. And I don't know, maybe he could potentially be moved. We'll have to see. But I think Marvin Harrison Jr., obviously the best wide receiver in this class. He is a next level type of number 1 receiver. He could play at all levels in the slot. He could play in the first, second, and third level of the field. He is fast. He's really good route runner. He's got great body control. He has the NFL size at 6'4", 205. NFL pedigree as he's the son of Marvin Harrison, a Colts legend. He's by far he'll be the next best prospect since Jamar Chase, and he'll definitely go top 5. So I love that Chicago comes away with those 2 prospects. Obviously, the Carolina pick. Carolina probably wishes they had that pick back. They could have probably taken Marvin Harrison, which would have been huge for Bryce Young. Moving on to the Giants, I am also going to trade this pick. Obviously, they're not going to trade in the division with the Commanders, but I'm going to trade with the Green Bay Packers, mainly because I think that the Giants don't have their needs won't be met with the 4th overall pick right now. Like, who can you pick? You only have bookend left tackles like Olu Fasano and Joe Alt. And then you're not going to take a quarterback, sign Daniel Jones to way too much money. You're not going to draft a running back top 4, and I don't even think any running back deserves to go top maybe in the first round. I'm not even going to take a running back in the first round of this mock draft. Spoiler alert. And then I also don't think your edge position probably gets dealt with like Leatu Latu or Jared Verse. I don't think those edge rushers are probably good enough to go top 5. We'll have to see in my later mock drafts. But obviously with the Packers moving up here, they've had a very up and a very down season. As of recently, it's been down. Jordan Love hasn't been playing as well, and they've faced tougher opponents. But I'm going to go with Joe Alt, which is my favorite tackle of the class. He has 1 sack allowed, but he only has like 4 pressures allowed. Overall, has been doing really solid in college football. He was really good last year. He's got great NFL size, good technique at the tackle position. And then for the Green Bay Packers, David Bakhtiari he's pretty much done. Injuries have swallowed the last 3 years of his career, and they need a bookend left tackle which I assume is going to be the franchise guy moving forward in Jordan Love, I guess. I don't know if they picked up his 5th-year option, but they have him for 1 more year at minimum. But he's an interesting case. At sometimes Jordan Love can be really good, but the accuracy has just not been there pretty much the whole year. But the poise has been there, and he does have good athletic ability. It's just the accuracy is the pretty big issue right now facing Jordan Love. Moving on to the New England Patriots, I think they also need tackle pretty big. But I also think that the more important position right now for them is going to be quarterback. Mac Jones is pretty much 100% not it. But the quarterbacks right now, I don't know who you'd want to take that high. J.J. McCarthy, I don't think really should go that high. I know he's really good in college. He's really good on the move, but he's a much smaller quarterback, and he also doesn't have great deep field accuracy or arm talent. Michael Penix Jr. is an interesting case study. He has had multiple ACL tears, injury-riddled career. However, in the last 2 years, he's playing phenomenal at Washington. But he's a southpaw. He's another smaller quarterback. But the thing about Michael Penix Jr., dude is not mobile. And he also loves to ignore the check down to go to the bigger play. Obviously, Washington has a ton of explosive plays, and Michael Penix Jr. is a big reason why. The deep field accuracy and the deep field arm strength is definitely there for Michael Penix Jr. If you want a system, I don't know what's a good system to compare. Oh, the Miami Dolphins would be a phenomenal example of a Michael Penix system that would work in the NFL. Obviously, it's with Tua Tagovailoa. They're fairly similar quarterbacks, but Michael Penix Jr., man, statue in the pocket, doesn't love to run, and also doesn't love to take checkdowns. An aggressive quarterback. Those sometimes don't necessarily work out in the NFL. He reminds me a lot of left-handed Derek Carr. And then Bo Nix, advanced age. He's been in the NFL he's been in college football since Justin Herbert and Joe Burrow were in there. Dude's been in college football since eight. I think he went from like 19 to 20. He's 23 now, and I think he'll be 24 maybe by when the draft rolls around. Advanced age, but that's just a little divulging about the quarterback position right now. But I am going to ultimately ignore quarterback because I think that Bill Belichick's just going to sign, or the Patriots are just going to try to trade for a quarterback. They don't draft well, I would say. The Patriots are not a well-drafted team. And I think Bill Belichick would like to avoid that to go for a more polished starter. That probably ends up Jimmy G. It probably ends up being Jimmy G going back to the New England Patriots. Moving on to the pick that I actually gave them, Olufasanu. Obviously, his first name is a little hard to pronounce. But Olufasanu, his thing about him is he's super big and he's super strong. He's around 6'6", 340. But the thing about Olufasanu is sometimes when very strong edge rushers play him, like we saw with JT Tuimoloau against Ohio State, he kind of got demolished. And when he lets defensive linemen get into his frame early, he can get pushed back a little bit. Obviously, JT Tuimoloau is a huge edge rusher. He's like 270, and he's got really powerful hands. But JT Tuimoloau is an extremely inefficient edge rusher, to be in all fairness. He has multiple one-pressure games, and he's got games where he's like this, and he's like this. And I guess against Penn State, he's always like this, because last year, JT Tuimoloau also put up a really good game against Olufasanu. But outside of that, Olufasanu is either the best or the second best run blocking edge rusher. I would say second best to Talasi Funga, if you can see on the bottom of the screen at Oregon State. He is probably the best run blocker out of this class. But for the Patriots, they need some tackle help. Their offensive line has been really bad this entire year. They allow a ton of pressures. But now moving on to the New York Giants, I think that this is where you take wide receiver. And there are two big wide receivers there are pretty much 5 or 4 wide receivers that I really love for the first round and that you're going to see me take really early on. But for the Giants, I specifically think that they need an X-body wide receiver. They need a true number 1. They kind of drafted a speed guy in Jalen Hyatt last year. They've got Isaiah Hodgins, who they really don't use anymore, Darius Slayton, Wendell Robinson. They've got the slot guys all settled out, but they really do not have an X-body receiver. And with that, I'm going to go with Keon Coleman, because Keon Coleman is probably the best contested catch artist in college football right now. I think he leads the FBS in contested catches, and he's top 10 in contested catch rate. He also has 9 touchdowns, around 500 yards as well, and he's been that star at Florida State as of right now. But Keon Coleman, 6'4", 200-ish pounds, actually quite fast, solid route runner, but you're mainly looking for that contested catch ability and that end zone dominance out of Keon Coleman. And it's for a Giants team that I think really needs to start adding explosive plays. When Daniel Jones is at quarterback, they're pretty much bottom in the league in explosive plays. And is that due to receiver or is that due to Daniel Jones? We'll have to see. But I don't think that they move quarterback this year. They have an opt-out in 2025, which I guarantee you they use. I can guarantee that they're going to use that opt-out. That signing is going to look really bad in the next couple of years, because Daniel Jones, he's weird. He's a weird guy. He's a weird quarterback, and I end up ultimately thinking they're going to move on from him if obviously his situation doesn't change. For the Colts, you can go with 2 routes here. You can go with either tight end or you can go with wide receiver. I would lean more towards tight end in Brock Bowers. Brock Bowers, phenomenal tight end. I mean, He is injured. Unfortunately, he is injured. He will miss the rest of the regular season unless come back for a Week 14 game with an injury. But Brock Bowers, man, he was number one in tight end yards after catch and number one in tight end passer rating. When thrown to, he was number two in yards. Um, and I think he had the most tight end touchdowns as well outside of the who was the other tight end? I forgot. Dallin Holker. Dallin Holker out of Colorado State, super underrated tight end. But moving on to Brock Bowers, man, he plays in the slot around 40% of the time. He can not the best blocker, but 6'4", 230 pounds. He is a Travis Kelce modern tight end build where he's just the really, really good receiver. He can break away from cornerbacks. He's a matchup nightmare against nickels and linebackers. He's a killer in the middle of the field, and he was the best player on Georgia. And Georgia's I think they're gonna struggle heavily on offense without him when they face some real tough opponents in the back end of their schedule. But I think the majority of their tough schedule is over now. I know they faced Kentucky and they beat them. But moving on to the Cardinals, this is obviously their first pick. They probably will end up as the number one overall pick. But I actually don't think that they're even that bad. I know the defense is disgustingly horrible. The defense is bad, but the offense hasn't even been bad. The play calling hasn't been horrible. I know they've lost a few close games, but they keep games close. Maybe not. Maybe in the score sheet they keep it close. Some games, like the Ravens game, obviously that wasn't a very close game. But I think that Jonathan Gannon isn't going to be fired. I think that they do give him another year. I think that they give the entire staff. I think they give a staff another year. I know that Gannon was looked at as like a transitional guy to the next year. But they really need to start bolstering that defense. And I'm going to give them my edge one currently in Leiatula 2. Dude's a phenomenal pass rusher. He gets a ton of pressure, and he's got a great bend off of the edge. And for a team that needs more pressure, I know that their best edge rusher is going to be like Zaven Collins with 3.5 sacks. And for a defensive-minded head coach, they're going to be looking towards the defensive side in this draft. In my opinion, obviously they have another pick coming up at 12. Moving on to the Denver Broncos, this is where I'm going to be taking one of my favorite receivers in Malik Neighbors. He's number one in FBS receiving yards. He has 9 touchdowns as well. He's almost at 1,000 yards in 9 college football games. Really been great with LSU. Really looked good with Jaden Daniels. Great speed. He's 6 foot. I think he's just 6 foot flat, like around 190 pounds, 200 listed. But I think once the combine comes down, he'll be listed more like 5'11", 190, which is a traditional slot nowadays. Slots are getting a lot bigger in size, and Malik Neighbors deserves it. I think he's the best slot in this class. He's fast, really good route runner, really quick in that intermediate area of the field, and I like that pick for Denver, as I think Russell Wilson probably gives himself another year, as Russell Wilson's been playing pretty well this year, if you guys haven't noticed. For the Los Angeles Rams, I'm likely going to be picking, I think that the necessary thing for them, it depends on how Aaron Donald shapes out. If Aaron Donald retires, I think you would definitely love to go with Jerzon Newton, because I think that the Rams defense would love a counterpart next to Aaron Donald, and Jerzon Newton is that guy. But if you don't decide that, I would definitely go with Talisi Fonga. I don't know, his name's a little difficult to pronounce. Fuaga. I don't know the exact pronunciation. However, Talisi Fuaga, really good run defender. PFF run grade of like 90. Really another big tackle. He's around 330 pounds, and he's also really powerful. Mauler type of tackle. Plays on the left side, and I think for the Rams, who generally struggle running the ball, would really use him at tackle. Moving on to Washington, I think that tackle is again in this play, and I think I'm going to pick that actually, because the thing about Washington is they allow more pressures than anybody. I think they allow more pressures than anybody. I know that Sam Howell has been sacked. I think he's the most sacked quarterback in the NFL. I mean, he was the most sacked like a week ago. I don't know if that changed as of recently. But I'm going to go with Graham Burton. 5 pressures allowed. Duke was having a really good year. They have faced some tough opponents as of recently, and lost a few matchups. However, Grant Burton, very solid tackle. Again, another left tackle, and obviously left tackles will go above guys like J.C. Latham and Artemis Mims, who are like pure right tackles. But don't let that fool you, because J.C. Latham, very, very good tackle. Artemis Mims, another really good tackle. But these guys will have the positional value, as left tackle is a much better, or is a much more important than right tackle. But I'll divulge in that a little bit later. Going into the Cardinals pick, I think that this is where you take your wide receiver in Romo Dunes. Really love Romo Dunes. He's an X-body receiver. He's around 6'3", 200-ish pounds. He's played phenomenal at Washington. I think he's top 5 in receiving yards. He's got 8 touchdowns. Playing really well with Michael Penix. Great speed, good route running, good body control as well. All the things you want from your X-body receiver. He's also really good on crossing routes and go routes. Overall, very solid receiver. I think that he also has potential to go top 10. And I think that this receiver class is really, the top end of the receiver class is so good with, Marvin Harrison, Keon Coleman, Malik Neighbors, and then Romo Dunes, that big four. And then if you want to mix in Emike Buka, who's been having slightly a down year, but I'll end up probably picking him in the first round as well. But moving on to the Buccaneers, I'm likely going to go with right tackle here. Probably going to go with J.C. Latham here. J.C. Latham, another really good tackle prospect out of Alabama. They always produce really good offensive linemen that go high in the draft. J.C. Latham, I think he has 0 sacks as of right now. I think he's also leading all right tackles in least pressures allowed. Best right tackle in the class for me. And then for the Bucs, you hit on Tristan Wirfs, who's a right tackle, moved him to left tackle. He's been doing really good. Left a void at right tackle, and you plug that with another first-round tackle in J.C. Latham. I don't think that they go quarterback right now. I think that Baker Mayfield's playing well enough to earn himself a second year with the Buccaneers. And obviously, I don't think tight end is a bigger need, and neither is linebacker, because you still got Devin Lloyd, and you still got Levante David. Although they are on one-year deals, but I think it's still too early to go for linebacker in the first round for them. For the Chargers, this is where I would go with your interior defensive lineman help. The Chargers have struggled against the run quite a bit, and they've also struggled with interior defensive lineman pressures. I know they signed Sebastian Joseph Day, but he hasn't been that great as of recently. But I'm going to go with Jerzon Newton, probably the best run defending interior defensive lineman and the best pass rushing interior defensive lineman. Maybe you can argue some are better as run defense, but Jerzon Newton is leading all interior defensive linemen in pressures by quite a few. I think he's got like 30 something, and the rest of them have like less than 20. Really good interior defensive lineman, plays at the 3 tech for Illinois. Obviously, he's not a nose tackle type. Anything for the Chargers system. Brandon Staley, listen, I think he goes after this year, but I think that Jerzon Newton would be a very good 3 tech next to Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack. Moving on to the Tennessee Titans, I think that, honestly, they have 2 ways that they can go, and I think they don't end up going with receiver here. I think that edge rusher is also in play. And that's actually what I think I'm going to go with. I was going to convince myself to give them a tackle because but they've already picked Peter Skoronski. They picked Peter Skoronski in the first round last year. Wouldn't expect them to go with offensive tackle twice in a row because Peter Skoronski, I know he's been playing. I think he's been playing between guard or tackle. I don't specifically know. But I'm going to go with Jared Verse here. They've been losing a lot of edge help. Harold Landry tore his ACL before the season started, and Bud Dupree obviously was released, and they're missing a lot of edge help. So I'm going to go with Jared Verse, who is a more technically sound, good explosive edge rusher out of Florida State. Had a bit of a slip in the first 4 games, didn't register a sack or only registered a half of a sack. But in the last couple of games, he's gotten, I think, 4 or 5 sacks as of recently. Obviously very technically sound. A bit of advanced age. He will be 22, probably 23 by when the season starts, by when the NFL season starts. But I think Jared Verse is my second best edge rusher in this class. Like him overall. Again, moving on to the Saints, I'm going to go with Kool-Aid McKinstry. Alontae Taylor is their cornerback too, but he's really up and down. His pass deflections are really good, but he also like allows a lot of yards and he gets thrown at a ton. I think he is top 10 in cornerback targets. Targets thrown to. But I think for Kool-Aid McKinstry, you put him across Marshawn Lattimore. Kool-Aid McKinstry, solid technique, really fast cornerback as well. You've got punt return capabilities with him as well. Overall, I think this cornerback class is solid, but not too solid. I would only see maybe a few cornerbacks go in this class. It's definitely not as good as the last two. Last two, you got like Sauce Gardner, Devin Witherspoon, Tariq Woolen. Um, you had Stingley, you had Porter, you had Gonzalez. You had a ton of really good cornerbacks in the last two classes, and I think this class is a bit of a fall off. I would like Kool-Aid McKinstry more than the rest of them, and including Nate Wiggins. I like in this class, but those are the best two to go in the first round here. For the Saints, you're a top 10 defense. You're a really good secondary. You keep on bolstering that secondary. Get Kool-Aid McKinstry here. I like how the Jets, their literal only need is tackle, and I agree with them tenfold. The tackle is obviously the humongous error of the New York Jets. That's what got Aaron Rodgers. That's what essentially tore Aaron Rodgers his Achilles. Dwayne Brown on a chop block didn't work. Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, and then you had to move Mekhi Becton to left tackle. You moved your guard, Elijah Vera Tucker, to tackle. He tears his Achilles. Now you have to move your backup Max Mitchell to tackle, and now you have a hole in the guard position. And now you move Joe Tippmann, a center who you drafted in the second round last year, to guard, and then he gets hurt, and then your starting center Connor McGovern gets hurt. So now you don't have your backup center and Joe Tippmann. So you now have to say your third star. It's all of that, you know what I mean? So what happens when you lose one offensive lineman? You have to mix it up a ton, and the Jets are going to lose Dwayne Brown this offseason. He's going to retire. He went on IR and he's not coming back. You move Mekhi Becton back to his natural position, which is left tackle position, from right tackle. And now you're going to add in the draft a true right tackle in Artemis Mims, who is another really good tackle out of Georgia. He played well last year. He's playing well this year. I think he also has 0 sacks or only 1 sack allowed. Did go out with an injury, though. I think he's back, though, at right tackle. So I like that pick for the New York Jets. I think that's their biggest need, and it's quite literally their only need, according to PFF. Moving on to the Cincinnati Bengals. I also think that this is a tackle position. So I'm going to go with... Well, assuming they're tackle, I know that they mean right tackle. So I'm actually not going to go with tackle, because the thing about this is Jordan Morgan and Patrick Paul are true left tackles. They've literally only played left tackle in their collegiate professional. The best right tackle on the board right now would probably be Blake Fisher as a true right tackle. So I'm actually going to go with edge rusher for the Cincinnati Bengals. I know that they've got two very good ones with Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard, but Dallas Turner, man, he is a pressure monster. In the FBS, he is first in pressures. He's got like 8 sacks as well. Really good edge rusher. He's smaller. A really good pass rusher, I'll preface. Really good pass rusher. He's smaller, at around 240 pounds, at around 6'3", 6'4". And as a run defender, he can get bullied a little bit by bigger defenders. He's more of a 2-down player for me, similar with like Chop Robinson, who PFF... Oh my God, PFF loves Chop Robinson. I like Chop Robinson, but I would say he goes like later in the first round. He is a true situational pass rusher. He is not an every down player at Penn State. He goes in for third downs and second downs. He's not in on first down, aka like the most run. The teams run the most on first down, and they don't run as much on third down unless it's third and close. But for Dallas Turner, he's in a similar conversation with Chop Robinson, where they're smaller-ish edge rushers, obviously like that 240 range, and they're situational pass rushers, except Dallas Turner probably has more down-to-down flexibility where he can play against the run sometimes. And but overall, Dallas Turner, you're buying the pass rush upside, and he's got great bend. He's got really good speed off the edge. He might be the fastest outside of Leatu Latu off the edge. So I really like that. So I like him going to the Bengals. For the Falcons, this is probably the most quarterback-like pick. And I'm going to end up going with Michael Penix Jr. I think I mentioned this obviously earlier, but for Michael Penix Jr., he's an interesting case study because he is really good down the field. He's scarily good down the field. He's got great accuracy. He's got good arm power to get the ball down the field. But the thing about Michael Penix Jr. is he's a statue in the pocket. He's had multiple massive injuries, 2 ACLs, and I think he's had a big shoulder injury as well. He's had some big injuries in the past. He's also older. He's also smaller at like 6'1", 215 pounds. So like he's like a similar build to Caleb Williams, without the athleticism of Caleb Williams. Obviously, here's the 213. He's 6'3". I think that'll come down to like 6'2" by the combine. And also obviously very not mobile. He doesn't scramble at all. I think he has a net negative for rushing yards. Obviously, sack yards apply, but he also sometimes ignores the check down. But I think for the system that Arthur Smith likes to play, he keeps his quarterback, or he would prefer the quarterback to be in the pocket or to be a slightly mobile, but he wants the run game to really get going. And I think for Michael Penix Jr., that opens up the passing game a lot to reopen up the rushing game. The thing about Desmond Ridder is that he doesn't open up the passing game at all. He actually only supports the running game because Desmond Ridder can run. He can run a little bit, but he doesn't open up the passing game at all. He's very very turnover prone. He also fits the ball, or he also puts the ball way too much into tight windows, which obviously are going to be more forced incompletions. Like Drake London has the most contested targets. So I think for Michael Penix Jr., I think that opens up your passing game a ton, and I think you're not asking too much of him to run or to make second life in the play, because you do have a ton of really good guys in the backfield too, like Bijan Robinson, we could just check down to. So I think for the Falcons, it makes a lot of sense. Or I think it makes more sense than the teams before. And I don't think Michael Penix Jr., I don't think it's a surprise that he goes a little bit later in the draft. Same thing with Bo Nix as well. For the Minnesota Vikings, I would lean towards cornerback. I know that Kirk Cousins did tear his Achilles, which is obviously very unfortunate. However, are they gonna they're gonna draft a rookie? Because you have Justin Jefferson, who's got an upcoming contract. Do you wanna do you really want to force him into a situation where he's got a rookie that's going to have a developing curve, and obviously they're not in a position, or right now they're not in a position at 20th overall pick. I think that comes down a lot where they're going to be getting that top tier quarterback. So I would presume that they go with more defensive help. They're not a very good defense, and their cornerbacks are kind of stretched thin. Byron Murphy's having to do a ton. Their safeties as well. But I'm going to go with Nate Wiggins, a true boundary cornerback. He's got a big build. He's around 6'3". I think he's back as well. 6'2", 6'3", 185 pounds. I think he's back. He was hurt for a bit after the Florida State game. I think he got hurt during that. But obviously, a 47 passer rating allowed. Very good cornerback, and I think for the Brian Flores system, he works well with that as well as the true boundary cornerback. Moving on to the Steelers, I think that this is going to be a linebacker pick. I don't love the selection that they have here. Braylon Trice and Chop Robinson, I think, would be the best selections as of now, but I think Pittsburgh is pretty well on the edge right now. They have TJ Watt, and they just drafted Nate Herbig, and they have Alex Highsmith, who they just signed to a huge deal. And then in the interior, they still got Cameron Hayward. I don't know why I forgot him. So, but I think that they do need a lot of linebacker help. They obviously have guys that they're going to lose after next year, like Quan Alexander, who's on a 1-year deal. So I think they need a more long-term linebacker, and that's going to be Jeremiah Trotter, who is probably the best coverage linebacker in this class. Solid against the run as well. NFL build at around 230, 6'2". So I like that pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers. That was actually my preseason pick as well. Moving on to the Houston Texans. I picked with their first who did I pick with their first pick? Oh no, they traded that pick. Oh yeah, this was the Will Anderson trade. right here at number 12. Yes, that was the Will Anderson trade. So this is the Cleveland trade. This is the Deshaun Watson pick. With this pick, I'm going to go with receiver. And you obviously want to make CJ Stroud as giddy and as happy as possible. So you're going to give him his number 2 receiver in college, Emeka Egbuka, who is having a huge down year in with Kyle McCord. I don't know. I don't know if it is injury or because I know he's missed a game or two, or it's just that Kyle McCord is just not playing as well. Obviously, Kyle McCord is kind of up and down right now. But with CJ Stroud, Emeka Egbuka was an 1,100-yard receiver and was, I think he had 9 touchdowns. So you add that to the already pretty good receiving core with Nico Collins as your 1, and then you got Tank Dell in the slot. Add Emeka Egbuka in there. That's a very good selection for them, and obviously he's got that connection already with CJ Stroud as his college quarterback, and you can never go wrong with drafting a receiver that played in college with him because you got that teammate bond. Moving on to the San Francisco 49ers, I really wanted to pick offensive tackle here. I think I'm gonna lean towards it, but I think that. No, I'm going to convince myself to go with tackle here. With Jordan Morgan, if he gets picked to the 49ers, he's going to have to move over to the right side because Jordan Morgan plays at left tackle. He's played at left tackle his entire career at Arizona. But Jordan Morgan, very solid tackle, NFL build, obviously. Left tackle mold out of Arizona, 6'6", 320. Pretty solid overall. I think he's allowed. I don't know if it'll show it on this, how many pressures he's allowed. Yeah, it doesn't show. But 2 sacks allowed. I don't know exactly how many pressures. It looks like 12. But he'll have to move to right tackle because Trent Williams isn't going anywhere because Trent Williams is a beast. But for the 49ers, I think they need more offensive line help because we can see when the play kind of breaks down a little bit, a lot of pressure can come from the interior. And I think when they faced the Cleveland Browns, we saw that a lot. And I think when we saw the Bengals game, we saw that as well. But I'm obviously not going to take interior offensive lineman right now. This interior offensive lineman class is kind of been down for a couple of years. But Cedric Van Pran, obviously the best center in this class. Zach Zinter is the best guard in this class. Tate Ratledge, it's an all right guard class, and I wouldn't take guard in the first round right now. You could probably come back in the second round for guard for them. For the Buffalo Bills, I think this is probably a safety pick. If you guys know me, if you guys been following me on Twitter, I really like this safety class. I think that Carmen Kinchins, I think that Javon Bullard, and Tyler Nubin, Kalen Bullock, I think are all solid, very solid prospects. Ron Moore as well. And for Carmen Kinchins, he is more of the strong safety type, and the Buffalo Bills like to keep one safety typically closer to the line. And I think that Carmen Kinchins would be a great pick for the Buffalo Bills, who have 2 aging safeties in Poyer and Hyde, who I think are definitely showing signs of regression. And I like that pick overall for Buffalo. I would also debate taking some interior defensive linemen, but I also think that the interior defensive lineman class is a bit of a mix because Leonard Taylor and Chris Jenkins are not the most productive edge rushers. They're both good against the run. Delta Corleone, I don't think it goes in this class. He's only played 2 years of college football. Mason Smith has not been great coming back from injury, and I wouldn't take any. T'Vondre Sweat I see going up a ton in mock drafts later on because he's huge. He's like 340, and he's a forklift at defensive lineman. But I think he would go in the early second round, as of where it stands right now. Moving on to the Seattle Seahawks. After pretty much talking about interior offensive lineman, interior defensive lineman, I'm pretty much going to go with that. I'm going to go with Cedric Van Pran. I think that the interior of the Seattle Seahawks offensive line needs a lot of help. And if I were to pick a center, it would be Cedric Van Pran. I think he's been very solid as of the last 2 years. This year he's got 0 sacks and only 5 pressures. Overall, he is the number 1 center in this class. I put him in contention with like John Michael Schmitz. Maybe not as good as Tyler Linderbaum as of a few years ago, or Creed Humphreys. He's not at that level where he's pretty much a Pro Bowler like the first year he's in the league. But he's overall a pretty solid center prospect as of now. Moving out of the Cowboys, I think that you're fine at cornerback. I know it has cornerback on the list right now. Leonard, or I forgot how to say it. Bland. I don't know his first. I forgot his first name. Bland has the most picks in the league, and he has 3 pick sixes. He's fine. You've got 2 productive, I guess, ball hawking cornerbacks with Bland, and then you got Trayvon Diggs. Diggs is going to come back from an ACL next year. And you have Stephon Gilmore, who I think is on a 1-year deal as of now. But linebacker, I don't think you necessarily need. You still got Leighton Vander Esch for another year. I think running back, you're not going to pick running back in the first round. So I think that kind of leads interior defensive line. Not even interior defensive lineman. I'm actually going to go with edge rusher here. I know it's not a listed need, but you already drafted Mozzie Smith in the interior defensive line last year. But for Chop Robinson, as I said before, he's more of a situational pass rusher. He's not very great against the run, and he plays. I think he plays like 60% of the snaps for Penn State as a mainly primary edge rusher, and he does good with that. He's a good pass rusher. He's got great bend. He's got good speed off of the edge. But he's not the biggest edge rusher at around 246. What is his height? I forgot his height. 6'3", 250. It's more going to come down. But obviously only 2 sacks this year. He doesn't play as many snaps, 133 pass rushing snaps. Last year that was 267, which is a little low. But I think his pass rushing prowess at times can probably earn him into the first round. But as I've been looking at him from Penn State, it's probably going down. I know that PFF listed him as the 10th rank on their prospect board. That comes down as the season will go on. For the Jacksonville Jaguars, I'm going to be going with safety here. I'm going to go with Kalen Bullock. I think that they need a little safety help. I know that they do have Andre Cisco and Jenkins. I forgot his first name as well. But Kalen Bullock is that center field type of safety. He had 6 interceptions last year. He has been playing phenomenal at USC this year, in my opinion, because I know that the USC defense is terrible. USC defense is terrible. Lincoln Riley does not know how to coach a defense. But Kalen Bullock has really been doing a lot for them, and especially when it's close in the red zone and when he needs to make a big play, he makes them. And I think he and Carmen Kingens it's a really tight race before who's 1 and 2. But moving on to the Ravens, I think this is your cornerback spot. I'm going to go with, I'm going to go with Cooper DeJean. If you guys don't know, Cooper DeJean is a white cornerback out of Iowa. But, man, is Cooper DeJean he's a great player. And I know there's a lot of controversy around Iowa right now with the fair catch that Cooper DeJean did with his rotating his arm. But Cooper DeJean, super athletic, super fast, and he plays good at cornerback. His passer rating allowed is a 42.1, and it was 49.7 last year. 0 touchdowns allowed, 2 interceptions on 604 defensive snaps and 340 coverage snaps. Dude's a good cornerback. And I don't know whether NFL teams are going to use that bias because he's a white cornerback, that they're going to be like, nah, we can't play him on the boundary. We're actually going to put him in the slot, or we're gonna mix him in at safety. He can mix in at safety, but I think he has kind of earned the ability to go to be a cornerback at the NFL level. We haven't seen one since the 2000s. But moving on to the Detroit Lions, I think this is also a time where you're going to go with cornerback here. Lions aren't the great against good passing offenses. We kind of saw that against the Ravens. Lamar Jackson was able to really pick apart the defense a little bit. And I know they do have Cameron Sutton on the outside, but I think that they need more help. I thought that Christian Gonzalez had really good contention to go to the Lions last year, and they ended up ignoring that to trade down for Jahmyr Gibbs. But I would go with Kalen King here at Penn State. The only concern I have with him is sometimes he can get burned by faster receivers. But overall right now he's been playing pretty well. He played much better last year. But 0 touchdowns allowed, 80 passer rating, a little bit more yards this year in 8 games because a big one was against a lot of the big yardage came against Ohio State because Marvin Harrison Jr. Listen, Marvin Harrison has killed him the last 2 years, but like, who wouldn't get killed by Marvin Harrison? That's like when Derek Stingley had to face Devontae Smith, and Devontae Smith went off for like 240 yards. Like, what are you gonna do? Like, he's the best receiver in college football. But moving on to the Dolphins, I think that this is also a good time to go with tackle. I'm gonna go with Patrick Paul here, out of Houston. No, 0 sacks allowed. I think he has like 3 pressures or like 4 pressures allowed. He's been playing very well at Houston, but obviously it's Houston. They don't play the toughest competition every year, but he's been doing very solid. He's also got that NFL size, and I think for the Dolphins, their offensive line is up and down. Teron Armstead is he's always injured, and I think they need more of a bookend right tackle, aka up line side for Tua Tagovailoa, who's a left-handed quarterback. So the right tackle position matters a ton more. For the Kansas City Chiefs, this is when the run on wide receivers is going to start. Or not run, it's the draft's over. Almost over. I'm going to go with Xavier Legette, out of South Carolina, having a very good year. He has 756 yards. He also is 6'3". Another bigger receiver, and I think for the Kansas City Chiefs, they kind of need a bigger receiver. I know they have Rashee Rice, who they drafted in the second round last year, who is around like 6. Rashee Rice is like 6'3", right? 6'2", if I'm not wrong. Marcus Valdez-Scantling is your Z. He's your dagger. You got Sky Moore, Kadarius Toney that mix in the slot. But I think that they're still missing that X receiver if, Rashee Rice doesn't come into there. I think that interior defensive lineman or edge rusher are also in contention. And then moving on to the Eagles, this is where I'm going to pretty obviously take safety. I'm going to go with Tyler Nubin, who's been having a phenomenal year at Minnesota. Plays very well against the pass. But that's going to do it for my mock draft. Let me know some of the teams that you think are going to take some of these players. Let me know some players you think could also go in the first round. And make sure you guys go watch my big board video where I break down these prospects in more detail. That video was also made around 2 weeks ago, so it's a bit outdated, but I will update it in a few weeks, maybe a month from now. Look maybe towards mid-November for another update. But that's going to do it for this video. Make sure you guys like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.